Reconvened in the committee room for a discussion of the manager's report, which includes update to the 2017-2019 long-range plan. Mr. Fieldman, good evening. How are you tonight?
Mayor Tully, council members, thank you. I'm doing well, thank you. Update to the 2017-2019 long-range plan. Everybody in this room, I think, is very familiar with this document. It includes our strategic goals for our village. And every 2 years, we put together the trends and issues that we're aware of at that time that affect multiple years in the future. We also developed solutions and strategies to address those trends and issues that we've identified. And we also go about identifying the priority action items that we would like this iteration of the council to complete in support of the long-range plan. In the off years, the middle year, I guess, in the 2-year period, we do an update, and that's what we're about to embark upon here tonight. We have a series of 3 meetings planned for the summer, which we will provide updates on issues affecting the 2019 budget year and beyond. We will also provide information and a status report on progress on our priority action items. So tonight, first of 3 meetings, we'll talk about general fund sustainability. Then we'll move on in June to those priority action items. And then in July, we wanted to take a little bit more time, dive a little deeper into other post-employment benefits. That is one of the issues and priority action items we've identified for this time frame. So tonight we're going to give you a little bit of an update on the issues and trends we see affecting the general fund, and we'll present our plan, which is basically the same plan we presented last summer. And we're just looking for council concurrence with this plan, or if you have any changes in direction, please provide that to us this evening. General fund sustainability. Obviously, we're trying to make sure that over the long haul, our revenues and expenses match up so that we can maintain the service levels that we provide, services we provide here in the village. The long-standing issue has been that our major revenue sources are flat or declining and therefore are not keeping pace with expense increases, right? Those curves those lines tend to cross, and if left to their own devices without a lot of work from our council and staff, we would be in the red. The solutions and strategies, I have a couple of them here on the board. They are long-standing. They've been on several iterations of our long-range plan. We are specifically trying to reduce personnel expenses. That is because the personnel expenses are the #1 category of expenses, accounting for about 3/4 of total expenses. We're always looking to increase operating efficiencies through the use of technology, partnerships, innovations, those types of things. On the revenue side, we're always seeking to enhance our existing revenue base. You'll see in the document that it speaks of working with our partners at the Economic Development Corporation to grow particularly our sales tax base and sales tax revenues, but that applies to all of our revenues as well, grow the base first. We're also trying to seek new sustainable revenue sources. You'll hear a little bit about that tonight in our update. And then the one that's really come up and been added to our list in recent years is strategically trying to reduce our reliance on state shared revenues, because we think eventually those revenues will continue to decline or go away. Just a little bit of information on general fund expenses and revenues. We'll start on the expense side. Key drivers of increasing expenses, of course, are personnel expenses. 3/4 of our expenses are in this category. And the 2 drivers within this category that we wanted to mention, again, are public safety pensions. The village is required, all villages are required to make annual contributions to the police and fire pension funds. These contributions requirements continue to go up as required under state law. You may recall for this year, 2018, we had a $554,000 increase to the contributions. Preliminary information for 2019 year is somewhere around $400,000 increase. So that continues to be one of the key drivers, portion of our personnel expenses. And then also continuing challenges with our post-employment benefit liability, which we'll talk about in some detail at the July meeting. So what recent actions have we taken according to our strategic plan, solutions and strategies? Well, earlier this year, we restructured the police department staffing primarily at the leadership and administrative level and in public education. That restructuring led to a reduction of 2.6 full-time equivalent positions. which netted us a recurring annual savings in personnel expenses of $400,000, a significant expense reduction. So you can see that is right and consistent with that first bullet point of reduced personnel expenses. So that was done in the first quarter of this year. Our plan on the expense side is to continue what we've had successes doing, frankly, for over a decade, and that is finding those operating efficiencies so that we can reduce personnel expenses, specifically by looking at the possibility of eliminating positions as they become vacant through voluntary retirements, people moving on to different jobs as appropriate. So it's not every position, but we work really hard when a position becomes vacant. How can we not fill that position? What can we move around? What uses of technology, partnerships, innovations? We've been very successful over the last decade. I think we've eliminated, my goodness, 75 positions or more, somewhere around there. On the revenue side, the key drivers of flat and declining revenues. Again, sales tax. We've been talking about this for many, many years. We just wanted to illustrate what we mean by truly flat. Our 2018 budget has $11.4 million in revenue from sales tax. In 1998, we received $11.4 million in sales tax. 20 years, flat. That is by definition flat and declining. So flat in numbers over a 20-year period. Now it went up in between and come back down and kind of leveled off. If you factor in inflation, that is a significant decline. Income tax, also a challenge we've been speaking about for several years now. This is also referred to as LGDF, Local Government Distributive Fund. This is state income tax that is distributed to a portion of it to municipalities. The issue here is the state has been holding 10% of municipal LGDF revenues for a year, their fiscal year. It's supposed to expire, this 10% withholding is supposed to expire in the end of June. The issue here, not only did that affect us for 2017 and 2018 budget, but now there's talk of potentially permanently withholding that 10%, which would cause further reduction in our revenues. And the other one we wanted to highlight as a key driver is another major revenue source. We don't talk a lot about it, but it's utility taxes. As a category, we budgeted $5.2 million in revenues in 2018, and similar to sales taxes, 15 years ago, we received $5.4 million. So utility taxes are flat and declining as well.
Don't forget about the skim, the 2% charge.
There was also a change last year affecting us this year that the state is holding on to a portion, 2% of our sales tax, home rule sales tax, for an administration fee since they collected and remitted to the municipalities. So that was basically a 2% cut in those revenue sources.
Also known as the skim.
The skim. Recent actions. You may recall that one of our priority action items was to look at seeing if we could identify long-term sustainable revenues consistent with our modern economy. And in the report that's online, the council members have in front of them, we actually presented the results of that study that we completed a couple months ago. And we found that there are 4 sectors of our local economy which are strong and growing. Income, property values, service businesses, and online retailing activities. Now that's great news. 4 sectors of our economy are growing. That's consistent with national trends and a strong economy. The challenge is municipalities under current state law are only allowed to generate revenues or tax one of those 4 categories, and that's property tax, capturing growth in property values. So there's much more information in the report, but we did complete that study, and those were our findings. We also, at the end of last year, in going into the 2018 budget, the council authorized a 1% food and beverage tax, went into effect first of this year. This is performing as budgeted, maybe slightly better. We budgeted $1.5 million in revenue. This, as an area, is a sector of our economy that has been growing since the Great Recession and is expected to continue to grow. So even if we keep the rate the same, we expect the revenues to grow 3 to 4% a year based on historic data. So this has been a great success story. It's been administered well, and it's performing as we expected. As far as the plan, obviously we want to try to solve as much of this on the expense side as we possibly can, but if we are in a position to have to adjust revenues, the plan is to consider increasing the rates of existing revenue sources, like the food and beverage tax perhaps, maybe an adjustment to our property tax levy for operations. We have not increased that in 7 years. It's been flat. Also consider adopting a new revenue sources. Their traditional revenue sources the Village of Downers Grove does not have. There's a couple options listed in the report should we get to that point. So that is the update on the general fund sustainability. Our general solutions and strategies are here on the board, and our shorter term plan is also here on the board. We're looking for any council member questions, comments, concerns, or any other direction. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Dave. Just a couple of questions, because the increases to public safety employee pensions doesn't really tell the whole picture. Dave or Judy, what's the, for 18 roughly, what's the total contribution? And then what's the total contribution for 19? You don't have to tell me right now. You can just write it up there next to it later. I could look it up myself. But I'm pointing out that those are the increases. That's not the total contribution.
Yeah, it's measured in millions now, so we'll get that information for you.
All right, just you can write it up there next to it. Doesn't have to do that now.
Didn't they cross paths? Didn't we begin to exceed total dollars expended on pension contributions versus operations from the property taxes and those categories?
That's why I wanted to put those numbers up there.
2 years ago, they crossed.
Sticking with the theme, we should probably also note for anybody that doesn't know in the listening audience that we also don't control those pension amounts. That Springfield tells us what
Right.
we need to put in there, and we put it in there.
6.5 million was 2018. 6.5 million. I just looked at our budget message just to confirm. So
Yeah.
6.5 million, our total levy for 2018, 13.3. The operations levy is less than the pension contributions.
Questions? Don't have to have any.
Well, big picture, I don't see any surprises here from when we talked about this last summer. And I'll just go on record as saying that from a high altitude level, I think staff is totally on the right track. And there's things to be determined, obviously whether we need to do something depends on how the 19 budget develops, and that's premature to get in any of the fine print on that. But the general overview that we're given this evening, we're on the right track. And basically, so I don't have much to say, because we said last summer, actually this gives me a little bit more optimism compared to what I've seen in the past.
Guarded optimism.
Yes, that's the only kind we have. Guarded.
Bill, what part about this causes you to be optimistic?
The flattening, if you look on page 4 of our report, the flattening of revenue and expenses. The long-term issue about pensions, eventually, these things flatten. Tier 2 will come into effect.
Well,
Slowly.
This flatten only goes to 2017.
Right.
So that you can't really say anything's flat. We're already in 18.
Well, I don't see anything that requires drastic action now. If next year things look different, things look different. But right now, I see no basis for drastic action. I think staff's doing an outstanding job of maintaining ISO 1, highest clear ratings, outstanding public works performance, and we're not deficit spending. So I don't see any basis for any major course corrections at this point. I think staff has an excellent handle on where we're at right now. Guarded, things happen, but right now, I think we're in. And there are some minor ways, that there are some revenue alternatives, which hopefully won't have to come into play. But if it turns out that expenses do grow, we do have alternate revenue sources, which can help balance some of that.
If it turns out expenses are going to grow, they're going to grow. The 10-year numbers, Dave sent around a note to everybody shortly before the meeting, because I was on this afternoon. And we've seen them before. They were from a year ago, Dave, on the board, I think.
Yes, last summer.
Personnel is down and actual personnel expenses up about the same amount. I'm not even counting the pension. Take pension and stormwater out of the equation. Assume those are going to operate a lot like a water fund. In the last decade, just personnel expenses, payroll, has consumed an additional 15% of our total revenues. Gone from like 61% in 2008 to almost 76% in 2018. Even though we've dropped 80 people off the payroll, and there can't be anybody sitting around this table that believes that staff's innovation and hard work, which has largely been successful, is going to be sort of infinitely repeatable. There's a point where is there 80 more people to drop? I kind of doubt it. In fact, there'd be some that would argue that there's more people necessary. My only comment, I mean, staff obviously has a good handle on where we are. They're as into this as anybody, and they certainly know it. But I would suggest that all of us start thinking between now and 7-10 meeting, where the numbers are going to get worse, because OPEB is going to start to look a lot like pensions. And how we're going to really manage this, because when we add OPEB in and we start taking $700,000 a year pension and OPEB tax increases, what's our plan going to be from a revenue standpoint? It's not going to be, there's not ever been, at least in recent history, a lot of appetite with councils to say we're going to raise taxes $2 or $3 million. And that's the kind of numbers that we're talking about in 2 or 3 years. This is not, there's nothing about this that's sustainable. This is sustainable through 19, we won't deficit spend. Yes, that's true. But anybody that thinks that this is a 10-year situation that's just going to go kind of like it's gone for the last 5 is nuts. And the state, the idea of relying on the state and trying to reduce it is really important, because, again, does anybody here think the state's going to say, never mind, go ahead and we'll just give you everything you've had before? Anybody think that? I mean, there's some real realities here, guys. Sales tax is not going to jump. Utility tax is not going to jump. The state is not going to do anything except skim further. They're going to look for every opportunity they can to skim, because they're in deeper trouble than anybody else is. But we should be thinking about this as we do not have enough money as a revenue source right now to operate the services that we're providing today. Not long-term. Long-term meaning 5 years. We don't have it. It's 19, yeah, we'll probably make it.
Right, well, and that's really the point, because you're both right in the sense that we're clearly on track for what was laid out in the 2017-2019 plan, absent some big unexpected issue, and there have been unexpected issues. They come back and it's not just keeping the LGDF cut at 10% permanently, but it's 20, or the new skim, or whatever it is. So, but absent something like that, which I think there's at least a significant chance of happening because it's happened, I agree, you're right, we are well on track for what the plan that this council set out for the balance of this council. You're absolutely right. Many have said it, that you can't keep doing this. I mean, it's a gosh darn miracle that you've been able to do it for as long as you have. And my goodness, what I'm suggesting is that absent some kind of a unexpected meteorite from Springfield, you're probably going to do it again. That's unheard of. You can't do it another 8 years. It's not going to happen. So yes, I think we're on track for this year, but this council can, kind of like what we're doing with the downtown plan, is this council can start laying the groundwork for the future councils as to what to do, because this is not going to happen. And we all have our different views on revenue sources and what dollars should be put towards what. But the best thing this council can do for the rest of this year is to lay the groundwork for the next council.
Yeah, I totally agree with what the mayor just said, because Bob, you're absolutely right that this view doesn't go beyond the near-term horizon. Unfortunately, at this moment, we don't have sufficient information about what's going to happen to come up with long-term solutions. If you think that you have a long-term sustainable plan, put it on the table and we'll see if the community buys into it. Right now, I'm not aware of any solutions that can give us 10 years of security. So we have to wait and see what happens. Springfield will be a very different place after the November elections. I'm not inclined to make any radical course changes until I see the outcomes of the November elections in Springfield, for example, unless they go and actually do something. They've been threatening the LDGF forever, not forever, but for a long time. So these are threats that exist. Okay, but they're not threats that I believe we need to respond to. Do we think about it? I'm sure staff's all over this, and I know I think about it, but I can't make a decision today or this cycle because I don't have all the data yet. Now, I'm aware of it. You're absolutely right. We need to be aware of it. But I don't see any action that we should take other than continue with this plan and know that next year maybe things will be very different, and we have to respond at that time.
There's a little, obviously, there's a lot of truth in what you said, because if you don't have the crystal ball, you're right, you don't have the data. But we do have 10 years worth of data to deal with. And we know that what it has done, even with our best efforts, which some would call miraculous, some would call outstanding, some would call them, all sorts of accolades, has gotten materially worse for us. And we also know that this council, the council before that, all councils, probably across the suburbs, are A, reluctant to raise taxes, and B, really slow moving. And so when you say, well, throw your plan out there and we'll see how the community reacts, well, even throwing a plan out there to see how the community reacts is a long-term process for an organization like this. It is not a spring of 19, maybe we'll start thinking about what it looks like next year. And so what I'm probably inarticulately saying, or maybe too many words saying, is that I think that if we miss this, if we take 18 and say it's just sort of a check-in and we're on track, that we're doing a disservice to everybody. Because we do know that 19 is going to be worse than this materially, and it is not going to be solved by another 2.6 FTE reduction.
Well, what I think we need to do, well, first of all, I don't believe it's fiscally prudent to raise taxes and put the money in the bank. The amount of return that we would get by parking money in the bank, it's like saving money to build a new village, a new police station. Putting that money in the bank so we can make 0.9% interest, raise taxes to park money at essentially zero interest rate doesn't make much sense to me. So I'm not inclined to preemptively raise taxes, park the money in a fund, because maybe someday we're going to face a future crisis. I do want revenue sources that we can dial. But when I say by that we can adjust by simply choosing to adjust it. I don't like the real estate transfer tax option because it's cumbersome and it has overhead associated with it. If we have a revenue stream that doesn't have overhead associated with it, we added the food and beverage tax. That can be dialed 0.5% if we don't think it. I'm skeptical, and I don't want to do that unless absolutely necessary, because I don't want to suppress our new restaurants. So there are things that we need to keep in the back of our mind as options, as hypothetical choices, to raise revenue fairly quickly if we face a crisis. But I don't see any reason to preemptively raise revenue and park the money in a usually buy a money market somewhere with it. I don't see where that's such a good idea.
I don't know where you'd even come up with an idea like that. What we have done is preemptively avoided doing things, whether they be signs or they be street
Well, you
rates,
suggested
or they be
we need to face the need to raise taxes. And we may have the need to raise
not
taxes.
do stuff that we all wish we
Do
could
stuff. What stuff?
We can talk about what we really need.
What
I think
If you can't come up with the stuff, Bill, you got a bigger.
Well, I think what you're both saying is that we have an opportunity here to use the next 12 months, or less than 12 months, to identify options, to identify what dials might look like, to also identify what the money would go for, and to embrace and involve the community in that discussion. Not to sound like another government body that recently did something, but was rather successful in convincing the community by landslide to support a really big chunk of money for some identified needs. And there were people on both sides of that, but clearly there were a lot of people that had an opinion on it. And I'm not suggesting that we go to a referendum, nor should we. We're elected to govern. But there's a unique opportunity here. There's a confluence of circumstances that we don't have any immediate crisis we have to deal with, hopefully. And this council can focus on what the options are, what the community would like money spent on. And the community says, I want another $50 million, I'm making that number up. Don't print that Bob rack out.
Mayor said $50 million.
If the community wants $50 million to instead of increasing stormwater regulations, they want to put in a whole bunch of new infrastructure, well, then the community can speak on that. And the community's going to have a good opportunity to speak to that real loudly in less than a month, less than a year. And so I think it's incumbent on this group to engage the community, to get those options out there on both where's the revenue coming from and what is it being spent on, so that we can get a message as a community next spring.
So let's, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I know it's easy for me to say that, but I think that that's a unique opportunity for this council.
Sticking
He
with,
throws around $50 million.
hey, a million here, a million there, sooner or later, it's real money, right?
Talk about 16-inch pipes.
So I think the revenue end of this is a worthwhile discussion, if only because, and I'm going to get the Springfield bat back out and start beating them again, but we talked about the opportunity to lay the foundation for the future, to set up future councils. And what I see here out of this report is that our revenue sources that are, or potential revenue sources that are growing, are either not within our power to touch, or they are the most illiquid asset that anybody has, your home. Now, you can raise property taxes, but your house doesn't suddenly have money flying out of it with which to pay those property taxes. So what I think we need to do is whether, in addition to LGDF, but try to avoid, to the extent we can, relying on additional revenue sources that are only set up to decline in the future, like we've seen with sales tax, which has been flat and then eaten away by inflation. We see the same thing with utility taxes. Online retail is eating the lunch of, fill in the blank here, and that blank is only getting larger. It speaks volumes about the archaic way in which we fund local government here in Illinois, is what I'm saying. We need to, as not just a village, but as municipalities across the state, continue to lobby Springfield to give us more tools with which to solve problems, rather than dump their problems on us by taking the LGDF.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and it's one that we've raised in prior long-range planning sessions, is are there additional tools? If we've been using the same fork, knife, and a spoon, fork, knife, and a spoon, is there something else?
When all you've got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Well, right. Is there something else that we can be creative about? I mean, this community, again, regardless of what your take on it was, 10 years ago, looking to adopting a stormwater utility was pretty radical for this part of the state. And it's turned out to, again, according to the community's input, it's turned out pretty well. Are there things like that we should be identifying as initiatives, as innovations, that could be revenue sources that don't have the stigma of property values, property tax, which I agree with you. Not only can't you avoid paying it, but if you don't get anything from a higher value to actually pay the tax. Whereas a lot of other things, you can avoid them. There's some relationship between the amount of the tax and other things. So I don't know the answer to that, but are there other innovations that we can identify that maybe are outside of our borders, outside of our state, that we should be exploring, so that the next council has some new ideas, different ideas that, and I don't know if any of these would generate any significant revenue, because obviously we're not talking about, we're talking about millions of dollars. We're not talking about thousands of dollars. I don't know, but that's where I think we should not lose sight of those things.
Those conversations are just not quick. That's what I guess I'm trying to beat around here, is they're not quick. We've got some, there's historically, there's the library, there's the recent 99 thing, there's the stormwater. We've got a community that has embraced situations that cost them more when they see value. But the process of laying that groundwork and explaining what it's for and why you're doing it and what your alternatives are that aren't maybe as appetizing is not quick, and it's not easy. And I'm worried that if we don't start that process now, if we wait till we sort of check in near the end of the 19 plan, we're going to have
I think we absolutely should be starting that process.
But what we do in that regard, as far as you use the word stuff, and no one's ever been able to find what stuff is. Stuff is either more revenue from a variety of sources, and I'm 100% supporting brainstorming about any possible revenue source we can come up with. The other thing is expenses. And I believe the lesson from the 99 referendum, I believe the lesson from the uproar with trying to cut the library's budget, is this town is willing to pay for quality services. Therefore, this town wants us to have ISO 1. This town wants us to have CLIA Gold Standard. This town wants us to have top-notch public works and community development. And that's not free. The way we lay the groundwork is explained to the public, these things are not free. And if you want to preserve those, we just can't go cutting everywhere, because then we won't keep ISO 1. We won't keep the CLIA ratings. We won't keep top-notch public works. And that's the core of the apple, to go to Mr. Mr. Waldeck's metaphor. And everything else we put on the apple, we need the core first, and but we need more. I'm not, the old core services, I'm not a big fan of that, the old way of looking at it. But it doesn't mean we don't have to do core services. Therefore, unless somebody wants to propose some type of radical course change now, our process is basically say staff's doing a pretty darn good job of moving us forward. There's huge threats on the horizon, and we need to engage the community to say, if you want us to, if you don't support the types of services I mentioned, then tell us. But if you do support those services, when something happens, we'll have to raise your taxes. Or we can't keep the services. There's no such, when I was in college, the definition of conservative was there's no such thing as a free lunch. You can't have ISO 1 without paying the fire department. You can't have CLIA Gold Center without paying the police department, and that's paying salaries. That's just now it is that the people should work for free. Otherwise, somehow they're cheating the public, and that, which is totally ridiculous. School teachers, I mean, if you want top quality education, you got to pay for it. So, of course, we have to think about this, but what we can do now is engage the community, like 99 did. You want these services? And there's these huge threats on the road. But as far as doing something between now and next summer, staff's doing what needs to be done right now. And I'm content with what staff's doing.
Two things on that. Number one, it's very important to remember that within the core, you find the seeds of innovation. Don't forget about that. But number two, this goes back to something we've talked about, I don't know how many times. I've talked about this website where there are slider scales. Because one of the things we're talking about is information. What do people want? What do they want to spend on? What are they willing to pay? Now, how do you know that? We can sit around here and contemplate our navels all week and never get the answer to that question. So is there something that we can be doing to find out what people do want to do? Other than what we're already doing, which is engaging the community and every potential, every possible opportunity. But there's only 7 of us. I know this has not gone anywhere in the past, but once upon a time I was in National League of Cities, and there was somebody on a website where you could put in all your key services and you could put in your costs, and literally every single person could go on this website and with a slider sort of adjust. Well, here's how much I'm willing to pay for this, and you would get sort of this profile. And it was very educational to the individual using it, because they would realize, yes, I want this, and I want this, and they'd see what the price tag was. Oh, I need to dial this back and move this up. And it made people realize your exact point, Commissioner. But sometimes you'd find people willing to dial it up a little bit because they didn't want to pay for something that perhaps they weren't getting, or they wanted more of, or that was really important to them. And I'm, again, not suggesting we go back and find that software. That company probably went out of business. I don't know what happened to them. But that concept, is that something that we can do in the time that we have left as this council to gather that kind of information to help make these decisions? That if hypothetically people are willing to spend another X on Y, what is the X and what is the Y? Because I agree with you. I don't like to talk about things in the abstract. But I think that's really where this comes down. Because at the end of the day, it's what the community will support. And we've seen examples where the community will support something loud and clear, and then it's an easy decision, right?
Well, and I just want to say that I appreciate staff bringing this to us now so that we do have a little time, because what's going on here is not sustainable. So we are going to need to figure something out. We can't sit and go down this same path, but I appreciate the time to kind of go through and potentially research, survey, and have something to come back to the table with, rather than just, try and make a decision with what we currently have in front of us. I'd like some more.
I kind of joked with Dave, because he had 6 or 7 of these items, and I says, well, in business, it's just basically 3. It's increased revenues, cut costs, and improve service, and that makes a good business decision. And talking about sustainability and being like Chicken Little and everything's going to fall doesn't do us any good. And it sounds good, let's talk sustainability, but we all know, every one of us knows what we face. And the thing is, what are we going to do about it in the future? Well, you can only cut so much. And And if you start talking to the public even years ago, you start adjusting the police force. Well, if it's gonna hurt service, don't you dare. And then when union contracts come, it's like, oh, pay them whatever they want because they're valuable, they risk their lives. Same thing with the fire department. But people don't know the actual costs and what we face in the future. So, being Chicken Little and saying we're going to have problems, we definitely need to come up with answers. We do have some Band-Aids, some things that we can do. You can always adjust the food and beverage tax. You can adjust utilities. There's some other items in there that are like minefields every time they've been talked about in the past. People hear about it and they get up in arms. We have a lot of challenges. I think Bill's right. And looking at what we have in front of us, we do have some options. And so that's the good thing. Thinking about it long term, we do need to seriously think about what we do with property taxes, what we do with the big ticket items. But we are top municipality in the state. We have a great bond rating. We're going along reputation-wise, and we stand in pretty good stead in comparison to a lot of others. And if Springfield overreacts, they start taking too much money, there's going to be a lot of municipalities that are going to crash and burn long before we do, and something's going to happen. And what I'd like to see is all the municipalities, all the IMLs, the page managers, I'd like to see all the municipalities get together and just basically have a Springfield revolt, and a very serious one, and tell them and let them know the damage they're doing. Because if all these municipalities are going to fail, we're going to maybe not be the last one standing, but we'll be there as a lot of others are falling to the wayside, and something is going to happen before then. So
I don't disagree with you.
That's my chicken.
I don't disagree with you, but I don't know if I want to wait until somebody goes through the windshield before we legislate seatbelts.
No, and I'm not saying that we stand here, we sit here and do nothing. I think we need a very strong PR move to explain what we're doing, what it costs. I've been on boards where they say, well, let's not raise fees. Well, when was the last time we raised fees? Oh, 2004. Well, people are going to be up in arms if you raise it. Well, if you do a little bit at a time, it's not so bad. And I think what we've done good is the pension, the increases in the pension, we've kind of automatically passed that through. I think that's a good thing. And we publicize it quite well, that if we have to pay something for pensions to fill that gap, that people are at least out there beginning to understand what it means. Oh, we got a gap to fill. It's not our fault. It's like the water. Cost of water went up, pension costs went up. Sorry, folks, this is something we have to do, and it's just passed through. And we're not improving service. We're not pocketing any money. We're not, this is all it is. We're just meeting the obligation. And I think that's good. I think our increases in water, pass through. Stormwater, pass through. Our costs, we pass them through. And if you want curb and gutter throughout the village, boy, you better reach in your pocket. And I think we've established some of those things. We do have some options, as Bill said, it's listed here. The long-range plan, the short part of the long-range plan is doable. I mean, we're on target. But long-term, yeah, we got a lot of, or whoever's here has a lot of work to do, and there's going to be a lot of challenges. And we should also include in there a big fight with Springfield, whatever we can muster.
Mark?
Well, it just strikes me that, we're talking about educating, you have to do some education of the public, ask some questions, find out what is the most palatable. But we also have a big community event coming up in about
37 days.
37 days. And we normally have a tent there, and we will be there.
Brilliant idea.
Maybe we should be doing some of this while we're there. That's, educating, getting some, I know it doesn't leave staff a whole lot of time to get some educational materials together, but, while we're there, instead of just having people ask us questions, maybe we're asking the questions.
Yeah,
Maybe
have
we're
a very
saying,
short
here's,
survey or something.
here's 4 or 5 things, what do you think?
So I'd like to chime in maybe from the staff perspective, because these conversations are very challenging for policymakers and staff alike. And I'd like to start by saying the staff recognizes that this discussion of sort of the inevitable unsustainability of this approach is dead bang on. It's absolutely correct. In fact, the staff lives it every day. I'm looking at Judy, and I can tell you that there is a day-to-day, balance the checkbook, budget year-to-year aspect of this that is incredibly challenging. So it's very real. But here's the success story. Here's where the Village of Downers Grove is different. And you see actions on the staff side and actions on the council side over multiple years that have put us in this position. So Commissioner Waldock was joking with me on the phone about, well, it's easy, just cut expenses and increase services. Who can do that? The Village of Downers Grove did it. Ready? We cut our police staff by several positions over the last 10 years. And during that time, we increased our accreditation status from accredited to accredited with excellence. Cut staff, increase service level. On the fire department side, we cut staffing. We raised our ISO rating twice. We cut general staffing, general fund in the finance department, what have you, in the last 10 years. We've raised our bond rating twice. Is it possible to continue to cut expenses and increase services? We have a decade that says, yep, we can do it. It's not just on the staff side. Let's talk about the heavy lifting and the major policy decisions on the revenue side this council and previous councils have made. When we came to this community in 2008, 2009, 2010, in the middle of the Great Recession, with long-range financial planning, as it was called back then, we demonstrated we could cut, and we asked the community to step up and give us more revenue. I think we've all forgotten that we had a 2-year plan to shift more increase onto our property taxes, and we actually raised our levy significantly during the Great Recession, I believe twice, in $500,000 increments, if memory serves. What a huge policy decision by that council to step up and educate the public to get support to do that. Our next iteration of this was in 2013, when we needed millions of dollars to sustain our stormwater system that we do have and expand it. And that council answered with the creation of the stormwater utility. Over $1 million added to a public need. In our version of the slider scale, with our national award-winning, not just the slider scale, but our 20 educational videos that resulted in the results that we had at the referendum question, overwhelming results. And then just last year, while it may have seemed easy and logical, it was a very tough decision by this exact council to institute a food and beverage tax. So what I'm seeing is, yes, all these things are true, but let's not forget that we have a decade of tough policy making, revenue decisions, of increasing revenue when we need to, and a continued commitment by this staff to continue to cut expenses and increase services. It is happening. Every year we sit here and say this is going to be the last year, and every year I think, yeah, you're probably right, and Judy comes to me the next Wednesday and goes, yeah, they're right, this is the last year. But we're going to keep doing it, and if we ever have a need, we'll do what we always do, which is educate the public, get consensus, and I think the council will step up, as we've demonstrated multiple councils, and do it again. What we're presenting here tonight actually is we don't think we have a situation where we're asking you to do anything. The staff is saying, as we started with Commissioner White, this plan seems to be working at least through 19 and maybe 20. Is it sustainable to 21, 22? Probably not. Every couple of years we have to do something on the revenue side, and every year we have to do something on the expense side. If we had any concerns that we needed to make a major change to balance the 19 budget, tonight is the night you would have heard it. We'll talk a little bit more about OPEB. We may have some challenges there, but we're at this point, we're not saying, hey, we have a major issue. We continually have major issues, but this group as a collective, council and staff, is responding. So that was our perspective we wanted to offer.
That's why I'm optimistic.
I'm guarded. I'm
Guarded.
And that's absolutely right, and I don't want the fact that we all jump to we gotta deal with the storms on the road to in any way tarnish the patina that is well-deserved for the last decade and beyond. You're absolutely right. But we haven't accomplished these things without thoughtful, mindful planning and thinking ahead. So all I'm saying is we need to be doing that, and let's take advantage of the fact that you're not asking us for any major course corrections right now. And use that time, use those resources within reason to plan ahead for the next major policy decision that the next council will have to make, because there will be one. And you just listed a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
So what does also history tell us? There will be more of those things that will have to be made. All I'm saying is that let's use this time and the resources we have when there aren't any major crises to plan for those next major policy decisions. And again, a microcosm of this is what's going on with the downtown management, the future of the downtown. We didn't wait until that decision was, oh my goodness, all these things are expiring, what do we do? We started 2 years in advance or more. What are the options? Started to engage people so that when the time comes, people can make decisions such as, yes, we'll support those property tax increases, yes, we'll support a stormwater utility, yes, we'll support a food and beverage tax. Whereas in other circumstances, in other times, there would have been torches and pitchforks at Village Hall. That's what I'm talking about. And I think everybody's kind of talking about it. I don't think anyone's really disagreeing. I mean, I think the outcomes may be different, but I don't hear anybody saying we shouldn't be planning for the future.
I'm okay with the conservative Chicken Little title. Really fine with that.
I love everybody's buying it. Everybody's owning these titles. I like this.
So that's a great segue. I think in June, when we come back for priority action items, the council will get a chance to see where we are working on these major initiatives and how they relate. And we can add or change course on there. I think it'll all kind of come together in July with the OPEB. You'll see sort of our
And I think you're not saying that there's any course corrections that are needed, and I don't hear anybody at this table insisting there be some major course correction at this moment, but that we need to be prepared for things down the road. And that means investing the time, effort, thought, and difficult conversations in order to be prepared. And I realize that it's an interesting time to do that, but if you want to get public feedback, this is the way to do it, folks.
So I think we can get together our story for the Grove Fest booth is really what I'm saying. That is a pretty good story that I think we'll be happy to share.
And don't forget that the tax burden in Downers Grove, the real estate tax burden in Downers Grove is amongst the lowest in all of DuPage County.
Yes.
Mayor Chirico in Naperville has a chart he likes to run around with, and deservedly so, that he shows every opportunity, and it has all these communities listed, and of course Naperville is at the very bottom with respect to its property tax burden. But the thing I like about that chart, and I actually like to share it and like it, is you know who the next community up is?
You're below.
It's Downers Grove.
Right, below Naperville.
So I love that chart. I love Mayor Chirico showing that chart. The only thing I think it's a great idea to utilize the information booth at Grove Fest and maybe even our coffee with the councils on a smaller basis.
Absolutely.
But it is a little bit more challenging to get people to weigh in on these kind of heavy issues at a short, and we'll have to think about how to do that.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to be able to watch a video, and they're not going to be able to, when we put up different, for example, when not Station Crossing, when a kitty on the green was done, we were looking at designs, everybody will come up and give you their opinion on what a building looks like. That's easy. Like it, love it. But so what do you think about $50 million for to resize all the stormwater in town? You know, I don't have time for that right now. I need to go buy some flowers.
Hey, at least if folks are flinging stuff at us at a farmer's market, we know it's fresh.
Right.
I do not doubt that this council will step up and do what we need to do.
Absolutely.
Everybody here, I know, I worked with y'all, we'll do what we have to do.
Right, but I think we should be well-defined, and the community needs to fully understand what is it that we have to do and how are we going about doing it. I don't disagree with you, Bill. But it's because we've invested that time and effort in the past, if this and prior councils have been able to do it with the support of the community, I might add.
That stormwater analogy is the one that I think is the most appropriate that we need to focus on. We spent a lot of time on stormwater getting people to understand what the system was, that there was a system. And I'm certain if we stand there at the booth and Crow Fest, we're going to have a lot of people who have no idea on some of the real basic 20,000 foot pieces of information, like, did you know your property taxes only pay for 25% of what's going on, right? There's a whole run of education that has to happen long before we say, what do you think about it? I mean, slider scales are great if they even know
What they're
that-
sliding.
That 90% of that bill doesn't go to us, right? I mean, there's a huge amount of work that has to be done, which is why I've got this huge sense of urgency, because that is not fast. Think about how many times we've tried to explain to people via our newsletter, via presentations and budget meetings about their tax bill, and think about how many people really understand it today. It's a tough subject because nobody cares about the pipes. It's just not fun, right?
But that might be another video too. So.
I was thinking
you know,
live
about your
theater,
tax bill.
where Bob plays a restrictor.
I can do that.
Chicken Little.
I can definitely do that role.
Because everyone loves street
I
theater.
want to see him in the chicken outfit.
I do want to toss out one other observation.
What have I done?
If we add sales tax, home rule sales tax, and food and beverage tax, that's a third of our total revenue. And there's no question, given the flat nature of sales tax over the last 20 years, that we're in a bear market on that. But in my mind, that makes it even more essential that the EDC be ingenious, proactive, and aggressive in preserving the sales tax revenue we have and capturing it wherever we can. We have to manage and aggressively grow to offset the losses, because otherwise, every dollar in sales tax is a dollar we save in property tax. And
No
therefore, the
question.
EDC has to stay focused like a laser, because that's where economic development flows onto the general revenue, and even if we're just holding our own.
Yep.
Because if we fail to hold our own, then we have a crisis.
I don't disagree with that at all, and I will credit this staff and this council and prior councils and the EDC for being creative. And there's some projects, folks, and we all know what we're talking about, that were not easy. And everyone in this room and beyond had to be creative and participants to make them happen and turn them into success stories. So I'm pretty positive about the ability to do that. People's minds are open. They realize you're going to have to do a little duck, dodge, and weave sometimes to make things happen if they make sense. And that it's not always going to be traditional. And we have to be open to that and support those things, because it's a different world out there.
And I have total confidence in Michael Cass, the same way I have total confidence in our current village staff.
Thank you. I'll pass it on to Michael as well.
When was the last survey we did? And how much it was, and how much?
This is a Mike Baker trivia question. When was the last survey?
If you
It's been a
remember, if you don't
while.
have it, that's fine.
Baker was this close,
Yeah.
getting out of the room without a question.
The answer is it's been a while.
Yeah,
It's been a
that's-
while. We had it budgeted once, and then we ended up,
Yeah.
12. It's 12 years ago.
So it's probably time to do something like that again with an educational component to it. But then there's a cost associated with it,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
maybe not this year,
That's why we
maybe
haven't done
next
it.
year. I don't know.
It might
That's
be
what
more
I'm-
stuff, though.
Yeah.
Surveys cost money.
Yeah.
Yep.
Chicken and egg.
Well, we'll put that on the list for potential priority action.
I
item
don't know, there aren't that
adjustments.
many doors in Downers Grove. I think we can knock it home.
You're knocking them all?
You put that on my list.
I'm pretty
for
confident
Saturday.
people in this room could knock
Yeah.
at every door in Downers Grove.
Just split it up.
What?
If you,
Split it up.
if you had new
Knock it out
shoes,
in no time.
Probably going to anyway.
One-
4,000 each.
Why is it-
28,000 divided by 7.
One last, Chicken Little conservative comment. I would encourage us all to be thinking, like I said, between now and July, about what we might do. But I'd also like us long-term thinking about, is our goal to do everything we've done as well as we've done it and maintain, or is our goal to do more, better? And yes, stuff bill is not going to get sorted out tonight, but I suspect there's 7 of us, so there's probably at least 70 ideas out there. But we
What's a different
have
thing?
largely done a maintenance job. We've done an excellent job of maintaining, and there's been some improvements like accreditation and things, but do we want to just make sure we hold serve on that, or do we want to do more, better? I think it's a question we should be asking as we try and ferret out from our residents what they want too. Because maybe they're all going to say, don't do another thing because it's all about the cash. Or they're going to give us a list of things they wish we were doing. I don't know the answer, but it's part of the equation, is not which here's how we pay for stuff, which new taxes or revenues would you like? It's also, what do you think about
Yeah.
what's going on?
Right, and that's important because we have real-world examples of when put to the test, we found that people didn't want to pay for things, and we found out people do want to pay for things. I mean, I had an example, I've told this story before, it was on my old block on Cornell, 4900 block of Cornell, the village was putting in a sidewalk on one side of the street. And what the neighborhood really said was, we really would like curb and gutter. Well, that wasn't in the plan, but we do have a cost share program where if the whole neighborhood wanted to kick in a certain amount, a little bit extra, not quite an SSA, but something like that, that they could have had curb and gutter and everything. It would have been great. Everybody thought, great idea. We had meetings, the plans were drawn up, until the numbers came out. And then all of a sudden, the support dropped off faster than leaves in October. And that's what I'm talking about. Sometimes you have to get it to that point where people realize, oh, well, no, I don't want to pay for that. That's what we don't know, and sometimes it takes a lot of effort to get it to that point to get that kind of answer. I mean, here I actually thought the neighborhood was going to do it. Because based on what everybody said, literally door to door, yes, absolutely, it'd be great, it'd be wonderful for the neighborhood, let's do it. And push came to shove, nope, not paying for it. And to this day, there's no curb and gutter on 4800 block of Cornell.
Economics 101.
But I mean, that's a microcosm of what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
All right, well, there'll be 3.5 CLE credits to all those who attended. Make sure you sign out. Is there anything on me? I don't want to cut anybody off, but before I go to
Let's stare at them until they talk.
anything else we need to accomplish before I do that?
Thank you so much. We have direction on the plan, and we have a couple of follow-up items as well. So thank you, Mayor and Council.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments from members of the public?
Sure.
Good evening.
Hi. Just some random thoughts. It would be interesting to show the public what the chart looks like and when expenditures are greater than revenues and what that actual gap might be. So I don't know, 7 years out, something like that. The other thing that pops into my mind is that delightful little chart that shows the dollar being split and Downers Grove having 9%, 9.1%. I think it'd be useful for people to see that.
Can we get T-shirts with that image on it?
We can. We can, actually. I think we're choosing shirts right now. I think that should be.
I think we need to have that not on a shirt.
1% will go down after the referendum, too.
Right. And then, just to clarify the question, under this real estate transfer tax, if you took the, I was going to say mythical $300,000 average home, but the average home at 0.25% transfer tax, that'd be $750.
Yes, sir.
One of those line items tacked on is all of those dozens of things in the real estate closing. What's this? Don't worry about it. You have to pay it anyway. Am I understanding that one?
Yes, sir.
Versus the vehicle sticker where everyone sees it, everyone buys it, everyone has to put it on year after year.
Yeah. Is the transfer tax the one that we need a referendum?
Yes, sir.
In order to put in place? It has to be, that needs to be adopted by a referendum.
Right.
Did we find out anything about whether we can do vehicle stickers without the sticker?
Yeah, we did a little bit of research on that, and the idea here is, could it be a vehicle registration rather than an actual sticker? Can we use technology? Can we set it up so that people basically can file information online, and we don't actually have to put stickers in there?
Tailpipe tax.
We reached out to our friends at the Secretary of State's office. They're not able to give us database information directly, but the idea is still alive if we ever went to that. I think we try to avoid stickers themselves because stickers have such a huge overhead and they're pretty ugly on the cars. So,
They're a constant reminder too.
yep. Yeah, so if we were ever to go that route, I think we could try to find a way
Well,
to.
do we know anybody in Springfield that can encourage them to adjust their software?
Yes, we are doing that. We have
Without
to
taking
see.
their cut.
Yeah, they've been great.
Taking 10% of our money to pay.
They've been great to work with, and we have great friends at the Secretary of State's office. They're very helpful. It's just right now there's some technological challenges, not a lack of effort. So, but we can work with them on that.
I think every municipality would like that option.
Yes, that would mean a much leaner approach to the stickers.
Anything else, Rich?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Last chance. All right, well, thank you both for sticking around. We can't adjourn tonight. We do need to convene into closed session, discuss the personnel issue.
Charlie, I move that this council convene in a closed session pursuant to Section 2C1 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act to consider the appointment, employment compensation, and performance of specific employees of the village.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we are convened in closed session in yet another room.
Oh, I'm.
We will not be coming out and taking any action, so.